That's that Boy Scout salute. You guys don't know anything about that. Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. Malika Young Puck dotting inside my chest, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate you guys very much for stopping by, taking a look at my stuff. So I'm thinking of the round, dude. Is it round 13? I'm actually spacing as I sit here on the actual round that it is. 1 second. Round 7, okay. Why'd I say 13? Craziness. So I have the round 7 game for you between Wesley So and Vladislav Artemiev. So for all of my people in the Philippines, as always, I will say mabuhay, magandang umaga, magandang hapon, kamusta na, maraming salamat po sa nanonood ng aking mga video. Ingat lagi, mabuting pagbati. Appreciate you guys very much for stopping by and taking a look at my stuff. Aking mga kaibigan. Appreciate you. For anybody who is coming from Russia, I will say privyet, dobre otra, and kakadela. Spasibo for coming by and taking a look at my stuff real quick. I really appreciate it. And for all the other people around the world, assalamu alaikum to you. Peace unto you if you do not speak Arabic or are not Muslim. That just means peace to you. Anyway, so if you guys are ready to go, let's take a look and see what we have for this game. Bam! E4. Knight to F6. Checkmate. No, I'm playing. It's not checkmate. Okay, so Knight to F6. This is the Alekhine's defense. Of course, you guys probably are familiar with Alexander Alekhine, former world champion, former, Soviet grandmaster. They awarded him, I believe, maybe I'm wrong. I feel like they would have awarded him a posthumous because he died in 1946. They didn't start FIDE and Grandmaster stuff until 1950. So I would assume that they gave him, they kind of, gave him a Grandmaster, title. But anyway, so this is actually, it's played, but it's slightly dubious for black. I mean, to be honest, it gives white just a little bit too much out of the gate. It's kind of, they don't call it a gambit, but it's kind of like in the same lines as some gambits that are just kind of like not 100% sound and just kind of throw you off. So we do see E5, which is like always pretty much the way you're going to play this because you're just going to, you have the possibilities of just like maybe like, let's say going knight to C3 and allowing E5, kind of getting into like a 4-knight situation. Like if you want to try to transpose, but it's just best to just go ahead and push E5. Let's displace the knight and punish black and get a tempo. Let's grab some space. This pawn is getting some space going. So knight comes to D5. You're going to see D4. D6 comes because you want to try to break down this structure. And, white just has way too much space. But, you kind of gave him the space. So knight comes to F3. Pawn takes E5. Knight takes E5. You have C6. Bishop comes to E2. You're just worried about developing and stuff. You're not really worried about the placement of the knight at the moment. Bishop comes to F5. You have castles by white. Knight to D7. Knight comes down to F3. It's not going to be as beneficial for you to trade there. It's just pretty much going to help black, kind of go queen here and get castled and stuff. So we have E6 by black. And then now we do see C4. And as you guys can see, white just has a really, really nice space. These pawns are like in a really, really nice position in the board. So, black is kind of getting pushed around a little bit. So that's kind of, one of the things that makes the opening just slightly dubious is the fact that you basically just give white all these different tempos and you're just giving them space. And it's not even a hyper modern situation. So knight 5 comes to F6. We see knight to H4 trying to inconvenience this bishop. If you can capture this bishop somewhere, a lot of the times you can, you can damage black structure. So bishop comes back to G6. We see knight to C3. Bishop comes to D6. And we see F4. And then we have castles by black. And then we actually see bishop to F3. Now, something that the computer really, really liked is say, hey, man, let's play kamikaze, which, the computer does. Knight takes G6, pawn takes G6, and then we have G4. And this is like super, super. This is a human has the ability to play like this, but this is just really crazy. Like, because, it's like you're just basically just like blowing your like king's position just wide open here. But this is actually very strong for white. As long as you don't, ease up on the attack and you keep it growing. But like I said, we did see bishop to F3. We got bishop to B4. Knight takes G6, pawn takes G6, and knight down to E2. It's not going to be as convenient for white to give up that knight right there. and damage their structure. Bishop comes back to d6, and now we see g4. So you can see Wesley So kind of latched onto that idea that the computer had just a little bit later on. We have c5. You have to pawn break somewhere because, you know, white just has way too much space. I mean, they literally have like 4 gigantic pawns just like taking over like the whole board. So you have to try to break it down somehow. So we have g5. Knight comes to h5, and we do see d5. Pawn takes d5. Queen takes d5. We have knight to b6, and this actually gains a nice little juicy tempo on the queen. We got queen back to d3, which you have to be careful because you do have your queen undefended right here. So the queen comes to c7, and you know, generally you don't want to just trade here because, you know, you're going to be fixing basically black's pawn structure, but you don't really have a lot of options in this case because you do have a lot of pressure on this pawn. So you kind of have to move the bishop out of the way, and the most logical place to move the bishop is just to kind of take the knight over there on the board. So it does help black, you know, fix their pawn structure. Bishop takes h5, pawn takes h5, and then we do see b3. Just trying to make sure we solidify our structure over here. We have rook f to e8. Bishop comes to b2. So, I mean, you know, white's still doing really good. I mean, white's in definitely a good position. You know, they don't really have too much to worry about. Even though their king looks slightly open, you're still good to go. h4 comes because you don't want white to play h4 themselves because then they're just going to have a really nice structure and they're going to start to try to move their king up and stuff, get into like an in-game situation. Queen comes over to f3. I mean, because rook a to d8 is going to be coming, and you don't really want your queen just kind of like, number one, undefended, but you don't want it just subject to, you know, different types of discoveries and stuff. So we do move that out of the way. We do see queen to e7, attacking that knight on e2. Knight comes to c3. We have rook a to d8, rook a to d1. Queen comes to e6. We have f5. And, you know, white's getting a little something rolling. Queen comes to e5. And the thing that's interesting about queen to e5 is it does kind of like allow a like discovery situation with maybe the bishop at some point. So you are threatening checkmate. So white does have to immediately respond to that threat. But you actually are giving white the ability to defend this bishop. Because right now the bishop, I mean, you can only really go knight to a4. You know, so that you can attack the queen because you don't really have any good discoveries right here. So rook comes to d2, and then we see bishop to c7. And if you want to go ahead and pause the video here, and this is not what was played in the game, but try to guess the strongest move in the position for white. Go ahead and do so. Okay, cool. So I kind of gave the answer away a little bit with what I was talking about a second ago. I realized there's not really a way to avoid it because, I mean, you wanna mention what I mentioned a second ago. So there are really 2 moves in this position. You know, knight to b5 and knight to d5, they kind of like fluctuate which one is better. But more often than not, it showed that knight to d5 was best. So knight to d5 would actually be pretty nice in this position. And the queen, I mean, is kind of running out of real estate. It's not trapped, but, you know, there aren't a lot of options for the queen. You definitely don't want to go back here because you're going to be looking at check here like this. You know, it's not desirable in any scenario because you're going to be dropping your queen. You do have to give some material up as white, but you're going to be getting a queen. So usually that's beneficial for you. But, you know, after knight to d5, we would see queen to e4. And then actually the queen would come to h5 and sidestep all of that. And then the interesting thing is after knight takes d5, you don't even take back immediately, but throw a little in-between or g6 in there because this is actually pretty dangerous, the situation that we're in. I mean, you're threatening to take here, you're threatening to move up here, and then you have like some nice little, you know, situations rolling and stuff where you can be mating at some point. So, you know, queen coming to e3 with check, trying to place an attack on that rook. Rook d comes to f2. Pawn takes g6, pawn takes g6. As you can see, it's pretty hot around the king. I mean, you have this bishop that's fully activated. This queen could be coming up at some point, you know, so you're probably going to have to retreat back here, something like that. You're going to be getting your piece back, and you are going to just be like in a really nice, you know, position. But like I said, we did see bishop to c7, and we did see rook d to f2, which actually lets black kind of off the hook a little bit and gives them like a chance to breathe. So queen comes down to e3. We see queen to h5. Okay, so I messed that up. This was the point that I was supposed to be doing the guess the move on. I forgot to. Okay, so this is the problem. I forgot to erase the guess the move where I did it and move it over to here, because this is actually a much better guess the move. So I just blew that. That's fine. Yeah, if you guys want to guess the move, no, I'm playing. Okay. Oh well. I mean, it's unfortunate, but I mean, it is what it is. I meant to stop the video here. I meant to erase my note that I had put before, because it wasn't like that crazy of a situation, and just kind of show that as a variation possibility. And then, you know, basically just like say, you know, what do you guess here? And this would have been really nice. I think it would have been really interesting had I done that, because bishop to g3 is actually a really, really nice move by Artemiev. And the interesting thing about the situation is, you know, this actually puts Wesley So in a really, really bad position. Because the problem is this rook is pinned. So if you do capture here, you're going to be looking at pawn captures. And, I mean, you're still under that same problem. So the bishop is just gladly sacrificing itself to, you know, and then it's like you can bring the rook down here. And it's just your position is just completely falling apart. So you definitely don't do that. But there aren't a lot of better things to do in this position. So knight came down to d1. You have bishop takes f2 with check, knight takes f2, and you're still subject to a pin. You're not pinning the rook, but now you are down in exchange. And, you know, black can definitely start to threaten some things. First of all, queen to e2. This is a really, really annoying move because you have your bishop and your queen that are both undefended. And so there isn't a good way to defend both of them together. So you have basically two options. You can trade, which is like the best possible option. Or you can do what Artemiev did in the game and actually play queen takes h4. And he just gives away the pawn completely. Or gives away the bishop completely, which, I mean, it's not ideal. As you guys can see, I mean, you do have an extra pawn, but you're down an entire piece. And this is just like, you know, Wesley So is, I mean, in this particular position, like Wesley So is just completely lost. So it's going to take a miracle for him to be able to try to come back. Like, basically, Artemiev has to blunder or something. So we have g6, you know, trying to see if we can work up some type of mate. But, I mean, these positions that are coming up with black, like, literally the king doesn't care about any of this. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. Rook comes down to d2, which is, you know, very legit. It was actually much stronger because, like, when you get in a situation where you are up a piece, you want to kind of step back for a second and sit and say, okay, like, what do I need to be doing the most? And a lot of the times when you do end up grabbing a piece, you've kind of overextended yourself to get that piece. So the good thing, like, so something that you really want to consider when you are up material is just backing up real quick and just making sure that you defend the position properly until you get to the point where you can start pressing forward again. So one of the things that Artemiev should have done is actually go queen back to e5. Just recollecting himself and just saying, hey, man, you know what? I did what I did. I got me a piece. Let me go ahead and just back up and just make sure my stuff is solid. Because if he was to do this, queen would come back to e5. You see queen to a7 with check, king to f8, queen to h8 with check, king to e7. And like I said, literally the king doesn't care because there aren't any pin possibilities going on. The queen is attacked. You have to retreat your queen back, maybe like check here or something like that. I mean, this is just completely won by black. And not saying what was in the game was not completely winning, but it just wasn't as winning. So, you know, rook comes to d2. We see queen to a7 with check. King comes to f8. Pawn takes f7. King takes f7. We got f6. And then black is still great. Like, black is still doing what they're supposed to be doing. Rook takes f2. Now, backing up, queen to d4 was like really just adding insult to injury here. Because you're pinning this knight, you have this rook that's attacking, and then you also have the ability to move this rook down. And I mean, you want to be really sadistic, just kind of do something like that with the knight. Like, you know, just literally take your time. I mean, because these pieces are pinned, so you know it doesn't really matter what the king does. I mean, if the king moves up here, it's still going to be a pin. So it's just really, really unfortunate. You know, the queen would probably take on g7. With check, king would come to e6, rook to e1 with check, king to d6. Like I said, the king just doesn't care. Like, you literally can check him literally until the checks run out, and it's not anything that they're going to cry about. So these are all different possibilities. But rook does take f2. We see rook takes f2, and this is the crazy part in the game where I'm sure probably you guys have seen this game either by, like, I don't know if Rad1 did it or a Gad Matter or, any of the Philippines YouTubers, but Artemiev actually completely just drops his queen in this position, and he plays the move king to e6. And I don't know like what he was thinking about, or like what was in his head, like as far as like the rook compared to the queen. I think that there were so many situations where the pieces were pinned on f2 that he just forgot that the piece wasn't pinned. And I think he just automatically registered like, nah, it's pinned, it's good. And then when he moved king to e6, Wesley So kind of laughed a second and just took the queen off the board. And he was just like, ah, okay. And it's happened to all of us. Every chess player has dropped the queen in their life. It is the most, literally, the most depressing thing that you can do in a game is just completely just drop your queen. Not only are you dropping your queen, but you are down an entire pawn. And this queen is like either taking this pawn or taking this pawn. So you're going to be down another pawn. It's just not winnable, man. And so this is, I feel bad for Artemiev for this one, man. But, congrats, Wesley So. Because this is what happens when you play the game of chess. So, if you are, dropping queens or just dropping pieces in general, don't feel too bad, because even a super GM can drop a queen. Magnus has dropped queens. Levon Aronian, I've seen, what's his name? Gary Kasparov. Like, literally everybody has dropped a queen before on accident. So don't get too bad. Don't get too down on yourself. But I'm going to go ahead and skip the good mornings this video, because I do want to keep the video under 17 minutes. But maraming salamat aking makaibigan. Mabuting pagbati. And I will say makita tayo mamaya. Paalam to my people in the Philippines. And spasibo for anybody that was coming from Russia. And I will see you guys next time.